it'd be cool to get your thoughts about fasting in general. Do you think on a personal level and at a higher sort of level of studies that you're aware of and physiology and so on, what do you think about intermittent fasting of like not eating for 16 hours and then having an 8-hour window, or something I've been doing a lot recently, which is eating only once a day? So that's 24-hour fast, I guess, one meal a day.
Now, none of this is about the actual long-term nutritional benefits of one thing or the other. But if you look at the science on intermittent fasting, it's pretty remarkable. Peer-reviewed papers in very good journals like Cell and elsewhere showing that limiting the consumption of calories to 8, 4, 6, or 8, or even 10 hours of every 24-hour cycle, and keeping that more or less correlated with the light, with when the sun is out, leads to less liver disease, improved metabolic markers, less body fat, et cetera. In the mouse studies, they even gave the mice the choice to eat whatever they wanted, as much as they wanted, as long as they restricted it to a certain period within the 24-hour cycle. They did great. They maintained a healthy weight or even lost weight. When they took the same amount of food and they stretched it out across the entire 24-hour cycle, so this is eating every hour or 2 hours, the animals got fat and sick. So it's pretty remarkable data. How much of that translates to humans isn't clear, but one thing that's really clear with humans is adherence, right? We could talk a lot about nutrition, and some of the problems with the studies on nutrition is that what people will do in a laboratory is often hard to do in the real world. Low carbohydrate diets, because they tend to focus on foods that have high amino acid content, like meats. Generally, people are less hungry on those than they are on calorie-matched diets of fruits and vegetables and carbohydrates, because when the insulin goes up, you get hungry and you want to eat more. So this is not a push for carnivore or a push against one thing or the other. It's just, there are a lot of factors. But we know for sure that when you're fasted, or when you have low amounts of carbohydrate in your system, complex carbohydrate, your alertness is going to go up. Fast increases alertness and epinephrine for the sole purpose of getting you to go out and find food. Can you imagine if our ancestors got hungry and they were like, oh, I'm too tired to go find food? We wouldn't be here. You'd be like robots, or one of your alien buddies will be like running the planet. Dream. So I think that if you want to be alert, fasting or keeping complex carbohydrates to a minimum is very valuable. If you want to sleep and you want to be sleepy, ingesting foods that have a lot of tryptophan, which is the precursor to serotonin, so complex carbohydrates like rice and grains, turkey, white meats, those things do create a sense of sleepiness. However, there is a caveat, and this is one problem with the once a day meal, is that anytime you have a lot of food in the gut, you're increasing sleepiness because you're diverting blood to the gut. It's going to trigger the vagus to signal to the brain to shut down your system and utilize those nutrients, digest and utilize those nutrients. So I've done the once a day eating thing. The problem is I eat so much in that meal that I'm exhausted. And so it doesn't always lend itself well to the schedule. But so in a 6 or 8 hour eating block for me is a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I do eat carbohydrates. I'm probably one of the few people left on the West Coast that actually consumes carbohydrates and will say that out loud.
I don't know people eat carbs anymore. That's weird.
They don't.
Where do you even find carbs?
Where do you find it? Yeah, I like oatmeal. I like rice. The other time is if people are doing very high intensity weight training, they need to replenish glycogen.
Yeah. On the alertness side, I do feel like it's probably person dependent. For me, alertness, being alert makes my life better in a lot of ways, more than just the alertness itself. Like, for example, one of the things I discovered with fasting is that when I was training twice a day in jiu-jitsu, for example, and competing and so on, I performed way better at things that you traditionally would say you need carbs for, which is explosive movements and all that. I don't know if I actually performed better in terms of like the force of the explosion, mm-hmm. the explosiveness. What I do know is the alertness resulted in me doing the technique more precisely.
That's the dopamine and epinephrine system in action. And there's there are some other just purely physical aspects to one diet versus the other that can be complicated. If you're ingesting carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, you're going to replenish glycogen, which is great, but they also tend to be bulky and fibrous. And I've never rolled jiu-jitsu, but running when you have a lot of bulky fibrous food in your gut or in your intestine it can be a barrier. It can be uncomfortable. And so some people do really well on low carbohydrate, meat rich diets because they're just not as bloated. They're not carrying as much water and other stuff. Carbohydrate carries a lot of water molecules with it. So there are aspects to being able to train and being really explosive because you feel light. One anecdote that really, again, I'm not